how to sew in, weave in loose ends. We're going to finish properly this weaving, and you can see it has a lot of yarn hanging off, some in mid-pick, some at the edges, here at the bottom, and at the back as well. Finishing is pretty simple. It just takes time. The first thing you want to do is decide if it's best to pop your weaving off of its loom and finish, or if it's especially kind of tender, gentle, vulnerable, you might want to turn your loom and do as much of the finishing while it's still tensioned, and then release it and do the rest. I'm just going to go ahead. Ours is fine. It's a sample weaving. So I'm going to go ahead and pop ours off. Now remember, we did some overhand knot finishing here. We did one braid, we did one ply, and then some hem stitch. I went ahead and just finished both edges with hem stitch. So these warp ends that have not been cut, that have been hem stitched, can actually hang out here. Nothing has to happen to them. I think you all hear my dog growling in the background. So to take this off, I'm just going to pull forward on these and pop them off the nails. A little at a time. You can see the weaving getting a little slack and relaxed, and that's great. Once I remove one edge of the weaving from the loom, then I go ahead and work the other edge free. This was packed so full, so it almost doesn't want to come off. There we go. Okay, you can go ahead and get your loom out of the way. And when I finish stuff, I always do it on a piece of white gridded paper, just because it highlights everything. It's a little easy to miss an edge, actually, because string will curl and tuck and hide. So you want to be kind of brushing everything free. Now we've finished the bottom of our weaving. That was the previous demo, so nothing has to happen here. What we have to do though is finish the strings coming out in these areas. So the first thing you want to do is pick a front or a back. This is going to be our front, and so all kind of connections, color changes where the string is hanging out in the middle of the cloth, you want to tuck them into the back of the cloth. So you flip it, find where these lines were, and just work them into the back of the cloth and pick them out. And you can do this with a crochet hook or a needle. So just find them and bring them into the back of the cloth where you'll finish them. Some were already in the back of the cloth, so these just join them. Now the front's looking pretty good. So we have these side weft ends. These are individual. This one is doubled up. If you're weaving with a doubled up line, you finish it as a single line. You continue to treat it as one. These individuals that are actually have a pick space between them, they'll be treated as one and as two. These two strings together get treated as three. This thicker one is a single pick. And
Pavel, please stop growling. Please, babe.
And most importantly maybe about this demo is I'm going to show you what happens when you kind of forget and cut an end too short. Okay? So to start, let's flip this into the back. The face of the weaving, the front looks good. We're going to be weaving all these into the back surface, so we can just flip it. Different weavers have different approaches. I know some weavers that are like, I have to finish everything in the center and then I work my edges, and weavers that do the opposite too. So there's no kind of right or wrong. It's whatever serves to preserve the integrity of the cloth, whatever serves to secure the structure, the warp tension first. A weaving will tell you what order it has to be finished in oftentimes. Okay, so let's start by finishing some center threads. We have a single one, and here we have a doubled one. I'm going to really go in as much as I can with it still being visible and clear. Okay. So what you want to do is, when you're finishing an end-in, you don't want to tension it so that it opens up a space in the cloth. And if I pull on these two, you can see the face of the cloth starting to form a hole here. You want the yarn, the string, the line to continue going in the direction it was. So you must find where that pick is coming from. This is coming from here, so I'm going to continue finishing it in that direction. It's coming from here, it's running, and then it comes out here. So I'm gonna continue to let it run where it wants to. And this really is reweaving. You are taking a line not directly on the same pick plane as what you are weaving in, you're going down one. That offset is going to be important. It gives it quite a bit of security. It makes it all the more difficult to unweave. So you go down a line, and then you just follow that previous pick. You're not weaving the opposite, you're just more lacing right through, following the path of the last pick. And you don't have to do it to a ton of warp ends. 3 or 4 is enough, unless you're working with some slippery material, you'll know. But this should be enough to just take this, drag this line through, tension it. My weaver's habit is I pat it into place. It does nothing, but it feels good. Okay, and so that's secure. And I'm gonna cut that off. We're done with that. And when you're done, cut it fairly close to the cloth, and it almost becomes invisible. The thing about finishing is when you're really good at it, you could actually mistakenly hang your weaving facing the wrong way in one of your exhibitions because it was too difficult to tell what was the front or the back. Personal experience. So this line you can see is coming from this direction, and when I pull it, it's coming from here, so I can see the track, and I just want to go down one or up one. It doesn't matter, just offset it by 1. Just kind of wherever it's easy to see the warp ends too. So this is really packed full here, and it's very difficult to see the warp ends, where if I go down one, it's so easy to see the warp ends. So that's what I'll do. Just 3, could do more, but this is enough. And the real thing is to make sure that you don't leave a little loop, nothing that can get snagged or untensioned, and then snip that off. And you'll see that from the front, it's completely invisible. Okay, and so you do that with all of your ends. You do not reverse course. You allow the end to continue to make its run and offset it by 1 pick, either the pick above or the pick below. So this is a really kind of clear area where the 2 meet. I'm gonna go down a pick end and just embed that here in this run. And I'm being very careful not to go around that purple material that made that original pick. I'm just like riding my needle above it. I don't want to interlace anything. I don't want to pierce through that line at all. Do you want to give it nice tension? And this is an especially good part of the demo because we're working with two really differently weighted material. So again, I go down one. Make that run. Really give it a good tension. Let everything lay kind of where it wants to. And again, you'll see that it's not at all visible from the front. Okay? And then you cut off your edges. And the same is true for everything on the selvages as well. You don't treat them any different than what we were doing to the interior ends that we were securing. You dress them through a needle. The one thing to account for when you're working with your selvages is because this is over the last warp end, see that's the warp end, and this is over top of it. Instead of reversing course now and weaving it in this way, you want to go ahead and just make one additional loop like this around that. And that's just going to account for the weave structure visually. And it's going to turn the yarn in the correct direction to then run that finishing into the body. Okay? And so then, because I turned around, I'm just going to go into that same row. And then I'm going to pull that through and tension it out. It's a little tight here, so I can pull some of that out so it really fits well with the edge here. So make sure you're looking at that when you're finishing. It's not just about securing the strings, you want consistency in the body of that cloth. And then I just left myself a little bit. Okay, so this whole selvage is pretty much finished. We'll tuck this one slightly larger end in as well. It is coming from this direction, so it will just sink into this pick. And you see that there was quite a bit to sew back in and secure here, but we're doing it and it's moving pretty quickly. So here's another edge that's long enough. Okay, and so we just, and it's under the warp end, so we see like one way to kind of decide whether you need to loop back around is to just go ahead and try it. It catches that last warp end, and that's pretty wonderful. So we just go into the pick below, we drag that material through, give it a good tension, make sure it matches with the edges that we're working with, and then we cut it off. Okay, so what do we do when we maybe accidentally cut this too short or there just wasn't enough material? You can't dress this through a needle and bring it back through, you know, the needle won't make the turn. So you can't dress it through a needle and bring it back through. You must do the opposite. You make your pathway, decide where you want it to go. This one even has to loop around this warp end to secure it. So we're going to do that with the needle. We're taking it on its track with nothing threaded through the eye yet. But as we move through this, what we're gonna do is now you thread it through the eye in a way that allows the needle to take it through and weave it on that track. And this is very fuzzy material, a bit of a clumsy move, but as clumsy as that was, we did it. We secured it. We don't even have to cut it. That's how short it was. But you see how it just tucked itself in and seemingly disappeared. Okay, so no trouble if you cut your ends a little too short. There's that solution for that. Now we just have really these ends to sew in. I'm going to lift this. I feel like it's a little difficult to see in its density. So sometimes I actually hold the cloth and let it drape over my hand to express the warp so I can get in there and actually do the weaving correctly. Okay. And then one more end here, and I do think that's going to be another situation where I want to sink my needle before I put my warp end in. It's just a little too short. So I'm going around, coming around. Okay. And yeah, so sometimes finishing is something that happens when the weaving is flat, and certainly you can use gravity to kind of help stabilize the cloth on a surface as you work it and finish it. And then sometimes, depending, you might have to wrangle it a little, pick it up, bend it to get to the structure so you can interlace your needle through effectively. Okay, so here we are, and this end is done. So this is kind of a funny one. You really want to make sure that you're tensioning it for regular edges. Great. Now our weaving is pretty much finished. It's just the bottom edge here that we have to account for, and only a little bit. So we have our awesome hem stitch edges. These can be treated in a similar fashion. If you're an embroiderer, you might want to just tie off, but I've also seen weavers continue to embed this stitch into its stitchiness and use this as a ground for sometimes macrameing across, crocheting off of. So like, yes, this is a binding stitch. Yes, this is a practical way to stop your weaving from unraveling. It's also, in fact, adding a particular structure that can also be worked off of, that's a little bit different than the woven ground. But what I would do here, this is already tied off in a knot, is I would just sink this into here as a way to direct the end towards the back of the cloth instead of giving it an opportunity to hang loose. And I'll just go ahead and sink this one more time and cut it off. And it's not a secure tie, it's just interlacing the end so that it doesn't pop out of the side. This, oops, my stitch seems to have a little bit come undone. I'm just gonna fix that by interlacing it back through. And then this is what I'm talking about when I say you can tie off. You can make a knot around that end with your needle. So you pick up that end like you're already coming out from under it. Then you just go back through inside of it, right? And then out through that loop that it makes and pull that. And that's just gonna make a knot. So I'm gonna tension my knot. And I would do that again. So let me show you that one more time. You come out from under the knot, which makes this little loop here when you pull through, and then you bring your needle through that loop. secure it with tension, pull your ends through. You're using the needle, but you're making essentially like an overhand knot. Okay? And that's secure. We can ground that end into our weaving so it doesn't show up, or we can cut it really short. You're also always free to leave part of a hem stitch down. You can hang a heavy object from this. You can use it decoratively in some way. So think about that. It's kind of a line that can continue to keep drawing on something. Okay, so this is the last one to finish, and I'm going to do that overhand knot again. So I bring it like this, I go under this, and then I come out, and I go through the loop when I come out. Okay, and that just makes that knot. And then I do it again. I go under that, it makes this loop, and I bring my needle through that loop. I bring my ends through, and then I tension them. Okay? And then I cut that off. Oh, and I see we kind of forgot to account for one of the weft ends here, the very last pick. The very last pick is an important one because it's pretty visually available. So you just want to make sure that when you treat it the same way. I'm just going a pick above. When you pull this through though, here's the important part, is that the loop makes the weaving the shape you want it to, right? This is creating the edge. So just make sure you only tension it as much as you want, and that it's not stressing the weaving in that direction. Okay, and that is the back of a pretty well finished weaving. What do you think, Matthew? Oh yeah, it looks secure. It does look secure, right? And we'll be able to pick it up now, kind of flip-flop it around. Nothing's falling out of it. We can pull on it a little. Excellent. No ends have come out. We have this weird fringe. We can do whatever the heck we want with that look. And so these are just some strategies for finishing. If you have more requests for more demos, let me know. And if you can imagine some scenario, something happening within the finishing process where lines extend to other weavings, extend to objects, hang from the wall, let me know, and we can definitely work on that together.